the biggest concern for the people of Weymouth, which is a seaside holiday town as the schools all break up, and it relies on these few weeks of the year to make its money, you're going to have 500 young men cooped up together in cramped conditions. There'll be disputes, there'll be arguments, there'll be difficulties, as there would in any situation with lots of young men put together. And the thought of these people wandering through the town, I'm sorry, I think this is a recipe for disaster. And I expect the people of Weymouth to become very voluble and very angry. And it doesn't really matter whether it's RAF Scampton, the home of the dam busters, whether it's Portland with the barge, whether it's a hotel in a town near you. The vast majority of people view this as unacceptable. The only way to solve this crisis is to break international law and send people back to France. It'll cause an absolute hullabaloo, but if we do it, they'll stop coming.
Nigel Farage has been vocal about his views on immigration, often focusing on what he perceives as the negative impacts of illegal migration and the challenges of integrating newcomers into British society.
We head to the high seas now, where we are joined during this electoral campaign. There he is, ahoy, we say to the leader of Reform UK, Nigel Farage. Nigel.
Good morning.
What takes you to the high seas then, and where are you?
We are literally mid-channel now between Dover and Calais, and behind me you can see a white dinghy. There are 45 people on board. Behind it you can see an escort vessel, because that's what the French do. Despite the 500 million quid we've given them, they literally, once these boats are afloat, escort them to our 12-mile line where they hand them over to Border Force. That of itself, I think, is outrageous. But the significance of this boat is that this number on this vessel take it beyond 50,000 that have come since Rishi Sunak has been Prime Minister. During Boris Johnson's time, 68,000 came, but he was there for double the period. So don't delude yourselves. This problem is getting worse. So we're witnessing a really very, very big, significant number today. And of course, Sunak talks about Rwanda and much else. But I'm afraid I see no sign under either Labour or the Conservative parties of this problem ending. I don't think they've got the guts to do what it takes.
So, at the very least, reform in terms of what it takes would get the French to say, if you spot a boat, you bring it back to your shores, you don't bring it over to our shores.
Well, absolutely, because these boats are illegally taking off from France. They're vulnerable boats. And yes, the French Navy should be taking them straight back. Quite how we've managed to give them £500 million and to allow this practice to continue is completely and utterly beyond me.
I was just wanting to talk to you a little bit about the claims that the Prime Minister was making during the debates last night. He was saying that migrants in Calais were waiting for a Labour administration because of the deterrent of Rwanda. I mean, you've just... what's the phrase I'm looking for? Truth busted that or fact-checked that for us this morning. That's clearly not the case.
I mean, the arguments that Rishi Sunak and James Cleverly are putting up, I mean, they honestly, they don't bear credibility in any way at all. Were this lot behind me waiting for a Labour government? Were they hell? It's over 128,000 people have come, 90% of them young men, many coming from war zones, from areas plagued by terrorism, gang crime, many coming with attitudes towards women that we would find completely unacceptable. I mean, how much worse could it be under Labour than it's been under him? And my hunch is that he had to call the election early because he'd promised planes would go to Rwanda in July. He told us people were in detention already, waiting to go. Do you know every single one of those people has been released on bail and at least half have absconded already? There were no boats going to Rwanda. We will not solve this problem until we leave the European Court of Human Rights.
Nigel, I wanted to ask you, and this is related, so bear with me, but you'll be aware that the IFS yesterday, on your tax plan, said that you were poisoning the entire political debate because what you were proposing was wholly unattainable. And I want to ask if you think it's fair that you could also say that about your arguments when it comes to these illegal crossings. A lot of people voted for Brexit on what you were promising, which was that this problem would be resolved. It's got worse. Yeah. I know you'll tell me that the ECHR now is the key to this problem, but we would replace the ECHR presumably with our own enshrined human rights laws because we are a civilised country, and lawyers would still find problems with detaining people who are legally or legitimately trying to flee war and other situations. So my question to you is what you're promising people truly attainable?
It's all attainable. Brexit Britain can do what the hell it likes. That was the point of leaving. You need a government that's prepared to carry it out. And sadly, we lack the will to do so. And it isn't just the £8 million a day for the hotels. I genuinely believe this should be declared a national security emergency. We have no idea who these young men are, no idea what they've been through, no idea what their intentions are. And that is just how serious this situation is. I think actually, logically, as a result of Brexit, we should leave the ECHR anyway. It's becoming an increasingly activist court. It's making it very difficult to deport those that come to our country.
Farage frequently highlights the issue of illegal immigration as a pressing concern. He argues that the UK is experiencing unprecedented levels of illegal migration, which he believes is fundamentally altering the country's demographic landscape. According to Farage, large numbers of people arriving without proper identification or documentation are creating significant challenges. He suggests that this influx is not just a temporary issue, but a growing trend that could have long-term consequences for the nation. He has pointed to recent incidents such as the arrival of 800 young men without identification over a weekend as evidence of the scale of the problem. Farage asserts that such numbers are unprecedented and suggests a level of migration that he believes the UK has never seen before. He argues that this level of immigration is contributing to a transformation of the country that makes parts of it almost unrecognisable from previous decades.
Wow, what a reception. Amazing. We decided on Sunday that it was appropriate for me to come up here, and quite right too. And we booked a venue, and I thought, well, I don't know. I mean, it's a working day. It might be difficult to get people out in the middle of the day. And I thought, well, I'll come, and there'll be maybe 150 people, maybe 200 people. And yet, with just 48 hours' notice, we've got 1,000 enthusiastic people here in this room. And I tell you what, if we had a couple of weeks to plan it, I can't imagine how big a crowd we could get in this part of the country. We will be doing a national event that'll take place this Sunday at midday at the NEC in Birmingham, and I fully expect it to be the biggest active political meeting that this country would have seen in modern times. I really do. And the reason is all too clear. We all have a deep sense of unease. Something is going very, very wrong with the country that we're part of, with the country that we believe in, with the country we want our kids and grandkids to grow up in. We have spent time indoctrinating a younger generation that everything about our past is wrong. We've been poisoning the minds of our young people. That, I think, is absolutely appalling. I want them to learn that whilst not everything in our history is perfect, actually, there is no country in the world with a better past than us, and we should be proud of those that went before us. There is a growing deep sense of unease, about crime on our streets. The fact, and it doesn't matter where you are, you can be in the poorest part of the country or the richest part of West London. The number of young people out there now threatening people, stealing mobile phones and carrying knives makes us all, wherever we live, think twice, doesn't it, about going out in the evening. And I'm aiming this particularly to young people. And by the way, one thing they can't understand is the extent to which I am connecting with the younger generation. It's very, very exciting. Whether that's a result of having snakes crawling all over me in my jungle or not, I don't know. But I do have the most active TikTok of any British political figure by miles, and I sense the younger coming. But it's interesting. You think, well, fear of crime is when you get older. No. It's the younger people that now fear crime more than the middle-aged and the elderly, because they want to go to music concerts. They want to go out clubbing, something for which the North East is world-renowned, incidentally. And they're deeply fearful that other young people are carrying knives. So there's a sense of unease about that. And the answer, of course, to that is a completely different, less woke approach to policing, and we should be executing stop and search, stop and search, stop and search. And perhaps there's an even deeper sense of unease about what is happening in our communities. We have always been, particularly compared to our continental neighbours, the most open country when it comes to our relationship with the rest of the world. Think of this part of England. Think of the ships that were built, the men and women that went all over the world, and in turn, people from other parts of the world that came here. And we're the only country in the history.
Farage's concerns extend beyond the mere numbers to issues of integration and social cohesion. He believes that the influx of people from diverse cultures is leading to the creation of separate communities rather than a harmonious integration into British society. According to him, when large numbers of people from different cultural backgrounds are introduced rapidly, it hampers their ability to integrate and instead leads to the formation of isolated communities. Farage has criticised what he views as the failure of the current immigration policies to ensure proper integration. He argues that instead of creating a unified society with shared values and commonalities, the current approach is leading to segregated communities that do not contribute to a cohesive national identity. He believes this fragmentation has significant implications for the social fabric of the country.
Of humankind, who has developed a relationship with its empire into one of a club that is called the Commonwealth. These things are remarkable achievements. And we've always been, I think as a people, far more generous and far more open-hearted to those around the world facing genuine oppression or the threat perhaps even of death. So we've always been kind to those communities in trouble around the world. We've accepted, absolutely, since the late 1940s, that immigration into Britain can be a good thing. Certainly the choice of food in most of our towns is rather better as a result of it. But what has happened over the course of the last 25 years is something entirely different. It is mass migration on a level that in fact begins not just to divide and damage communities and potentially to set people apart from each other, which is dangerous, but also I think a feeling that perhaps something about our culture is directly under threat. That sense of who we are, and that this is a problem. And just think about the numbers. You know, Tony Blair came to power. Sedgefield boy, of course, it's all your fault up here, it really is. Tony Blair comes to power and opens the door. And bear in mind, for the previous 50 years, net migration had been 30, 40,000 a year. That's what it had been for 50 years. Tony Blair comes to power and opens the door. And net, over his premiership, 2.7 million people come. And the Conservatives accelerate it, because now nearly 4.5 million have come since they came to power. Now, you are suffering less with this problem in the northeast than certainly the southeast, where I'm from, where the roads are clogged beyond imagination. Access to a GP is pretty much impossible at short notice. And housing has become, for most young people, simply an unobtainable dream. And rents are up by 20 to 30% across the country in the last 4 years. It's a simple demand-supply equation. And that's why I've said from the start, this really should be the immigration election. I don't know whether you watched the debate last night between, no, you had better things to do, I can't say that I blame you. But if you did watch the debate last night, furious arguments on tax, furious arguments on immigration, furious arguments on the Channel boat crossings, a subject that I will return to, I promise you, it's my specialist subject. Furious arguments between them, and yet, in policy terms, there isn't really much to choose. In fact, the more they argued, the more they seemed the same. Has your phone stopped ringing? I'm so sorry to inconvenience you. I really, really am. Don't worry about it. I don't mean it. And so, we have a sense things are going wrong. And by the way, if you're self-employed out there, or running a small limited company, you know what I'm about to say, that neither front bench has any comprehension of who you are or what you do. None. But does the Labour Party offer any solutions? Well, to begin with the Conservatives, and it's worth saying here in the northeast, of course, Sunderland, I'll never forget Sunderland, and the early hours of June the 24th, 2016, when I was feeling utterly depressed. The polls had closed. It was the end of a 25-year journey for me, because I'd just gone on relentlessly believing that the best people to govern Britain were the British people themselves. That was what I fought for all those years.
Farage has also expressed concern about the potential political ramifications of immigration. He has suggested that there are discussions about granting voting rights to immigrants, which he sees as a form of political manoeuvring. He points to left-leaning think tanks and political commentators who propose extending voting rights to immigrants and interprets this as an attempt to manipulate electoral outcomes. He criticises these suggestions as a form of gerrymandering that could significantly alter the political landscape. Farage argues that such moves are not only politically motivated, but also disregard the long-term consequences for national identity and social stability. He believes that this kind of policy could backfire and damage the political parties that support it, particularly in the short term.
Today at Blenheim Palace, a meeting, yes, a big get-together of the European political community. This, it will not surprise you to know, is something that doesn't exactly thrill me. Well, joining me to discuss this in the studio in London is Sir George Howarth, former Labour MP, and Baroness Jacqueline Foster, life peer and a former member for the Conservative Party of the European Parliament. So a lot of discussion, folks, today about doing a pact with Europe where they might take some of our cross-channel illegal migrants and we might send some back the other way. George Howarth, it seems to me that if Keir Starmer was to enter into this, we'd probably end up receiving more people under this deal than we'd send the other way.
Well, I don't know what the basis for you being able to say that is, Nigel, but I think everybody sensible would accept that we have to have sensible agreements with, first of all, France, because that is where most of them are coming from as the last port of call. And secondly, we have to have agreements with, either bilaterally or by other means, with the rest of Europe. And we've been saying that as a party for a long time. Yvette Cooper's been saying it. And I think that is the best way forward.
Well, we'll find out. And interestingly, Border Force took a boat back today. I'm going to come back to you on that in just a moment, because one of the things, George, one of the things that Starmer did say at Blenheim Palace is under no circumstances will Labour leave the European Convention on Human Rights and its associated court in Strasbourg. But what is interesting is overnight we get the news that Border Force picked up a Mayday call, picked up a group of migrants in the Channel and took them not back to Dover but put them into Calais. Do you think this was a political decision? Could this be actually the way that we do solve the problem?
To be honest, Nigel, I'd be speculating if I was to say it was a political decision. However, I think the tone that Keir and Yvette Cooper have both set since the election is that we're not going to tolerate it. We're going to deal with the problem, whether it's within Europe or, as the announcement said today, in the sources of initial migration in the Middle East and Africa. And so I think the tone may have emboldened the Border Force to do what they did. But also, I think it's important that it also shows if we get cooperation with France, there is a real prospect that we can deal with this problem in a way that would be effective.
Interesting word, Jackie Foster. You know, at no point since 2018, when the boats started coming, first slowly and then rapidly after 2020, at no point during a Tory government were any migrants taken by boat back to France. Are Labour now beginning to beat you on this argument?
I wish I could say yes. And obviously it's early days, and congratulations to them. But the European Union, there's always a quid pro quo. And whatever they agree, I think the point you raised at the beginning about any deals that are done, would we then end up having to take in illegal immigrants from the rest of the European Union? From my point of view, that's a non-starter. I think in addition, Keir Starmer also said he was going to give them another 84 million. Well, we've already given France about £500 million of taxpayers' money, and they've done absolutely nothing, frankly, over the last couple of years. You raised the point about the boat that turned round today and took these illegal immigrants back to Calais. My question then would be, well, why haven't they been taking them back to Calais for the last 2 or 3 years? So I'd like an answer to that. I do wish them well. Your point on the ECHR, I think, is very valid. I think the ECHR, I think it's out of date. And in terms of the legislation that we did pass, and we really tried to get good legislation through over the last 2.5 years, and we were actually thwarted at every quarter, whether it was the Rwanda bill or whether it was the illegal immigration bill, by the opposition parties, frankly, to put safeguards in to try and get to the bottom of this. They've apparently now been pretty well ripped up. So I wish the Labour Party well. But this is not going to be, there's no quick fix in all of this. And obviously what we have in all of this is this great tragedy of people.
Farage often frames his arguments in terms of protecting British cultural and national identity. He expresses concerns that the increasing presence of people who do not share the same cultural background or values could undermine the sense of national unity. Farage argues that there is a risk of eroding traditional British values and norms as a result of rapid and unmanageable immigration.
People who basically are trafficked and those that lose their lives. And that's been one of our biggest points. We shouldn't be having people losing their lives. There are legal ways to get into the United Kingdom. And many people come into the United Kingdom legally. and they don't need to have their lives threatened. And we know this is all about gangs. We are part of Interpol. We're part of all of these bodies that are trying to stop this. Where will the Labour Party, where are they going to deport their illegal immigrants to? Because they've thrown Rwanda out, the baby out with the bathwater, yet there's other countries in the European Union looking for countries to send them to.
Hang on, Jackie. If Border Force start taking migrants back to France, they will stop paying they'll stop paying traffickers. George, I must ask you one other thing that's been raised. David Lammy seems particularly keen that we sign up close to, although he's not been explicit about joining, a European defence union. How on earth can we reinforce NATO, strengthen our relationship with NATO, and at the same time be prepared to take orders potentially from a separate command centre in Brussels? That's my big worry on defence.
Well, look, I mean, first of all, I think it is important that if you look at Ukraine, and you and I probably differ on this, but if you look at Ukraine, it is clear that we need European defence systems that thwart the territorial ambitions of Putin. And secondly, there are common security issues which need to be discussed. But, of course, NATO will always take precedence over everything else. So I don't have any worries on that part. David Lammy has proved in the period when he's been Shadow Foreign Secretary that he's a patriot, but also that he wants to make sure our relationships with the rest of the world, including on security, are properly founded and properly carried out.
All right. OK. Well, Jackie, George sees no conflict here between being part of NATO and potentially tying up close to the European Defence Union. What do you say?
I think you've got to have a look. You have to have a look at the detail. I mean, you know, and I know, we were in the European Union, in the Parliament for the same time, and there was always this push, wasn't there, to common foreign and security policy and defence. And of course, you know, we've got two nuclear powers, obviously with France and then obviously with the United Kingdom. Although France left NATO for a number of years and then came back. You know, NATO is the kingpin, and what's important is actually where you are, and it's who's going to be the next president of the United States, in my view. And of course we do have a very good relationship, frankly, with the European Union. It's not just the EU, it's the whole of the ECAC, the 44 European countries. We are at one.
He has criticised certain groups and individuals who, in his view, are promoting policies that undermine national identity and cultural cohesion. Farage's rhetoric often includes a call to protect and preserve what he sees as the core aspects of British culture and identity.
And I'm delighted to say we are joined in the studio right now by Mr. Nigel Farage from the Reform Party. Obviously not the leader of the Reform Party. What's the official title?
Honorary President.
Honorary President of the Reform Party. Kicked off yesterday in Dover with an event at which you unveiled a new MP candidate for Dover, Howard Cox. But you also sort of kick-started, I suppose, the Reform campaign about stopping the boats, about how the Conservative Party have kind of lost the plot. But you also came up for an awful lot of the usual kind of barrage the Farage type stuff, didn't you?
I did. I mean, look, I was there to say the reason the elections on July the 4th is dead simple. The big promise of planes going to Rwanda was not going to happen.
Right.
They weren't going. There's no way that court in Strasbourg was going to allow this to happen. Sunak knew that. He knew if the planes didn't go, one of his flagship policies would have been absolutely catastrophically torn to pieces, and the Reform vote would have gone even higher. So that I was there making the point that actually the Rwanda plan doesn't work, all the while we've got a foreign court in Strasbourg telling us how we can control our borders. Simple as.
Yeah.
Worth pointing out, though, that Starmer and the Labour Party have nothing to say. Tackle the gangs. We've been saying that about the drugs gangs in Britain for decades. It makes no difference.
It doesn't work, no.
There's too much money involved.
Well, I've been saying this morning, you know, only a week ago we didn't know there was an election, right? And it didn't happen until 5 o'clock last Wednesday. But ever since the starting gun has been fired, there have been all sorts of conversations about national service. We've got today the end of the Mickey Mouse degree. We've got the NHS being presented as something that the Labour Party can fix. There hasn't really been any immigration policy which has been unveiled by either party.
You know why? You know why? Because Labour opened the door to mass immigration on a scale this country had never seen, and the Conservatives have accelerated it.
Yeah.
The numbers are even bigger. So neither side wants to talk about legal immigration. Neither side will dare talk about the fact that parts of our towns and cities are literally becoming unrecognisable in every way. And I talked at the weekend on Sky with Trevor Phillips about British values being undermined.
Yeah.
Look at that demonstration last night in Parliament Square.
Incredible.
I mean, were they British values?
Well, they were shouting for jihad, as far as I could make out.
Yeah.
And they were also there from 6 in the afternoon, and they were supposed to finish at 8. They were still there being cleared out by the police at 2 a.m. I mean, you know, my father used to say to me when he watched these demonstrations in the Middle East, what do these people do for a living? You know, there doesn't seem to be anybody actually doing any work.
It's okay. The welfare state looks after everybody.
Yeah,
it's fine.
it absolutely does. But, you know, then you see the Angela Rayner story from today, where she's been seen at the weekend talking to a group of what can only be described as Muslim community leaders, I'm assuming, promising them that if Labour gets in, they will recognise Palestine, which is not even Labour Party policy.
No, and did you notice? I mean, she was begging, actually.
Yeah.
Begging for vote. Did you notice?
Quite craven.
Not a woman in the room.
No.
Did you notice the celebrations in Leeds, Bradford, Burnley? All the men outside chanting. Not a woman to be seen.
Yeah.
So we're heading for sectarian politics in which women are excluded, which virtually takes us back 100 years in terms of our advancement as a society and the way in which we've changed. So my job, Mike, over the next 6 weeks is to travel around the country and to try, through the media, to challenge Starmer and Sunak to start honestly debating issues that they would rather brush under the carpet, and at the same time support reform candidates.
Now, of course, many people said that, you know, you should debate Rishi Sunak. I've had a couple of messages from people before you came in today to say, why don't you challenge Keir Starmer to a debate? Because actually he's more likely to be the next Prime Minister. Would you do that?
I'm going to. I'm going to. I half did it yesterday, but I'll make it more formal over the next 2 days. I mean, look, when it comes to the boats, and I'm going to say this, I was there 4 years ago, going out into the Channel.
You were on here 4 years ago with me.
Talking about all of this, and I was predicting that this was going to become, that the trickle would become a flood, would become an invasion. Now, they can't bear me using that
word. They don't like that word.
But it's 3,800 boats. Just think about that.
Right.
It's almost unbelievable that it's that big. It's like D-Day in reverse.
Yeah. Well, you said this yesterday. And also, you know, when it went over the 10,000 at the weekend, it was 5 boats, I think, all of which had more than 50 people on them.
Yep.
So these are not really even small boats anymore.
No, they're getting bigger and bigger and bigger. I mean, the average 4 years ago was about 15 per boat. Now it's 50.
Yeah.
That's the big difference. But nobody has been involved with this issue more than I have. And just as Nick Clegg, when he was Deputy Prime Minister, challenged me to a debate on Europe, I think on illegal immigration, if they want to have a conversation, I'm the person to come to.
Now, Henry Bolton, who was on with us yesterday, funnily enough, was looking forward to your speech down there in Dover. But he said afterwards he didn't think that you'd actually said what you would have done to stop the boats. He said, you know, we know that reform would have...
In discussions about his own political ambitions, Farage often contrasts his views with those of the major parties. He highlights the growing support for his party, Reform UK, as a sign that his views on immigration and national identity resonate with a significant portion of the electorate. Farage points to poll results that show Reform UK gaining ground and sees this as an indication of potential success in future elections.
Have a plan.
Deport people who come illegally. And here's the funny thing. Here is how the national debate has gone so far to the left under 14 years of Conservatives. In the year 2009 to 10, the last full year of the Labour government, they deported 45,000 illegal immigrants. We now deport a few thousand if we're lucky.
And we've done away with the detention centres that the Blair government used to have.
Absolutely,
you know.
Absolutely. So the answer, what I was saying yesterday, Henry, if you're listening, was that all the while we have a foreign court overseeing this. That's the Gordian knot you have to cut. Once you cut it, you're free to do what the hell you want. But we have people who come illegally have to know they will be deported.
Well, listen to me. When we talk to people about whether or not you should have stood and whether or not you should have run as a candidate, they say, well, we're a bit disappointed.
I know.
You know, they wanted you to be the sort of the torchbearer, if you like, because
well,
you are the leader, regardless of Richard Tyson. I'm going to ask you about him in a minute. You know, he's somebody that's very well known to me as well. You know, you're considered as the leader of Reform, even though you're not technically the leader. But you said that you didn't want to run because there wasn't enough time for a campaign.
Can we deal with disappointment first?
Yes.
All right. I was going to launch my campaign tomorrow.
Right.
Tomorrow. To say, right, that's it. 6 months on the road campaigning. Whether Sunak caught a whiff of that or not, I don't know.
Right.
Maybe he did. It's not impossible. Maybe he did. I can't start in a constituency from scratch in 6 weeks and come and talk to you,
right,
travel around the country. I literally cannot do both. So it's a big decision. What do you do?
Right.
And I want reform to get many millions of votes. It is going to get many millions of votes. I very much hope we get that spearhead into Westminster.
Yeah.
Because I tell you something, Labour are going to win. It's over. Labour are
Because that's the
going
other
to
question that I get from people is why do you not look forward to more of a sort of, rather than looking forward to coming second if at best, or coming in a third maybe at worst, why not look at actually possibly going all out and winning?
Because it's impossible. We have a system that is, if this was proportional representation, an Italian-style system, a Dutch-style system, I promise you, I'd be sitting in here saying to you, I can beat Keir Starmer.
Yeah.
But we don't have that system. And because of that system and the way in which it works, people do, however they think, vote differently. But what we can do, and what we need to do, is to realign the centre-right of British politics. And if Reform aren't strong, and Reform don't have a presence in that parliament, we can't do it. The Conservatives are going to be in opposition, but they won't be the opposition. They hate each other. They disagree on virtually everything. They honestly, policy-wise, serve almost no purpose. So I think that is a better, bigger thing I can do in the next 6 weeks than going to a constituency and spending time.
He is particularly critical of the Conservative Party's handling of immigration, suggesting that its failure to address the issue effectively has led to a decline in support among voters. Farage views Reform UK as a viable alternative for those dissatisfied with the current political establishment and believes that the party's position on immigration will be a key factor in its electoral success. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and for more content like this, be sure to subscribe to the channel.